Live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. She comes to us from Canada, from British Columbia. Her name is Elizabeth Nickson. Last name is spelled Nickson. And she was recommended to me by Joe Patty Munisterri. If you listen to my show recently, I did a show with her I titled MKUltra at Georgetown. It's just a gestalt kind of word, MKUltra. People can latch into it. But this is also a really great guest for me because I've done shows on the subject we're going to talk about today. I did a show based on the book Father, Son, and CIA by Dr. Harvey Weinstein. Not that Weinstein, but Dr. Harvey Weinstein, a very well-respected academic at Stanford, whose father was caught up in the Ewan Cameron sleep room or whatever they want to call it at McGill. And so Elizabeth was recommended to me. It turns out her family member was involved in that. She's from Montreal, if I remember correctly. She's also an accomplished author and a journalist. She's written 2 books that I found on Amazon. One is a fictional novel, a fictional book called The Monkey Puzzle Tree. If you're watching this on Rumble, X, or Rockfin, you'll see the cover of it. And I was reading through it today, and the names are all names that I know, like some of these attorneys that have been involved. The litigation surrounding this McGill situation is ongoing up to today, and there's been multiple lawsuits. And I can bring up this complaint that was just verified as a class action within the last month, really. I think it was July 31st. But Monkey Tree Puzzle reads like reality. It's not pure fiction, in my opinion. She's also written a book called Eco-Fascists, How Radical Conservationists Are Restricting Our National Heritage, Destroying Our National Heritage, And then her Substack is Road to Absurdistan. So I'll put links to all that stuff. We're talking in the pre-show, and what's interesting is she had met Ewan Cameron, who is this really sinister CIA-affiliated doctor, but she can talk more about everything I mentioned at the intro. So Elizabeth Nickson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
For people who aren't aware of your work, your journalism, your books, or your Substack, maybe you can talk about your background and then kind of what led up to this event that you wrote about on your Substack about the MKUltra lawsuit.
Well, I was in London. I was at Time magazine when I found out about the experiments. I'd come home for Christmas and one of my brothers was talking about it. And, it was a very difficult period for me because it was so profoundly shocking that could happen to a nice middle-class family like us. My mother was a patient of Ewan Cameron's for 17 years, I reckon. Her first child, her son, died of a cot death at 2 months, and she developed anxiety, and I guess they diagnosed her as having what they called then a nervous breakdown, and she went into the Allen Memorial or the Royal Victoria Hospital, which is what is being sued right now, and was basically put into an insulin coma for 2 weeks and slept. She just slept and was brought out of it and interviewed and then put back in. It was an experiment that they were doing. And from now for the next 9 months, she was in therapy with Cameron. I have most of her psychiatric records because of the 2 lawsuits I'm involved in. And interestingly, this was first litigated in DC in the 70s, and it's the only one of the sub-projects of MKUltra, and there's 150 that we know of, that is more fleshed out. It's not fully fleshed out because we don't know what they took away with them and, buried in Langley somewhere, but we know what the elements of the experiments were, and they were as follows: that you shock and traumatize the patient to the point where they have no recognition of themselves as an identity. This was first discovered by I think, a paperclip scientist at the Allen that was brought in by Ellen Dulles and Ewan Cameron, because they went over to Nuremberg together and rummaged through the various experiments that the Nazis were doing in the camps, and came away with a lot of these ideas and brought some of the people over. And I think one of them was in the Allen, and she amassed 9 individuals, 1 male and 8 female, and put them into a semi-coma, masked their hands, their eyes, their ears. They couldn't, their mouths. They had no idea whether they were up or down or sideways or backwards. And within days, they decompensated and became infantile. So that was the experiment, supposedly, that caught the interest of the CIA and brought the whole program to Montreal, which was out of the way, right? It wasn't in the States. There was lots of plausible deniability. It was brought in through the government and the hospital and one of the dominant foundations who were associated with the Rockefellers. So what they would do next, once they'd reduced you to nothing, and basically what they started using was Page Russell's shock treatments, which were a series of very sharp shocks that would just, again, reduce the patient to nothing. And they only used in the experiments people who were mildly mentally ill, like my mother, like Dr. Weinstein's father, who I think had alcohol. He was an alcoholic. He drank a lot. There was another woman who was a doctor in training to be a neurologist who had anxiety. And Cameron, he kind of went to town on her as if she wasn't allowed to be, she wasn't allowed to become a senior doctor. It basically broke her brain, but she was, I think, the steel backbone of the first suit. The first suit was prosecuted by Joseph Rao, who's a famous American civil rights attorney in Washington. He knew how to get the records. And that's why we know about MKUltra, because Joe Rao shook him out of Langley. And after that suit was settled, the CIA did not admit harm, but they paid the patients. What was his name? I can't remember right now. He proceeded to destroy all the rest of all the other 149 sub-projects. So we don't know.
It's not Dulles. It was his follow-on, Helms. Yeah.
Helms, yeah, right. That's who destroyed it.
And so, for people who don't know, Rauh spelled R-A-U-H. It's the difficult. The guy's a hero is amazing.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, so after they'd reduced you to nothing, they would clap a football helmet on you with speakers in your ears, and they would repeat hundreds of thousands of times that you were worthless, your husband hated you, your children hated you, your mother hated you, everybody hated you. And then after about a week of several 100,000 repetitions of these negative affirmations, they would interview you and then remake the affirmations in a positive way. All the way through this process, they would pull you out of the process and give you sodium pentothal and methamphetamine and interview you, and to the point where you became garbled, at which point they would diagnose you as being even sicker and requiring, this was in my mother's case, after she escaped once and tried 2 other times to escape, and was brought back, and then they would up her diagnosis. My mother was a beautiful and brilliant young woman. She'd gone to university in political science and economics. She'd been a naval officer. She worked for the Atomic Commission as a courier and secretary. And before she met my father, or when she met my father, she was an editor and a writer at the evening paper in Montreal. So she was an accomplished pianist, and she was an amateur golfer who competed. She was kind of a star, which was interesting because when you interviewed, I should have this name,
Joe Patty Monastery.
Yeah, the one about who was
Georgetown.
No, not her.
Oh.
The one who was talking about the assassins and the J.D. Salinger book, how they would Ted Kaczynski, that they would choose the brilliant to experiment on. And many of the women that were in the Allen were the wives and daughters of the elite of the city, the Molsons, the Morgans, the Masseys, the Burkes. All of those families had a brilliant and beautiful woman put through the mill and almost really turned into Stepford wives. My mother, after, had lost, I would say, about 10 to 15 points on her IQ. And that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to find a way to break the spirit of educated women. That's, I think, was one of the things that they were trying up there.
That's incredible. And you kind of came, Molson's, for people who don't know, were a big brewing family back in the day. I don't know if Molson's being sold in Canada, but you kind of grew up in that upper middle class environment as well, right? Okay.
Yeah, and so the idea that they would pick on us was so was profoundly disruptive to my state of being, or my understanding of the world, because my father was a war hero. They all worked in charity. They were good people, right? they were about as good as you can get in the modern world, and they were virtuous, they were educated, they were disciplined. So
why do you think they did it? Why do you think they selected these talented? Because Joe Patty too was like gifted. Like she was in all those early programs, the mini UN. That's a seeding thing for talented kids. Is this? Not fictional UN. I forgot the name of it. But why do you think they did that?
Because they wanted to be able to control minds, and you wanted to work on the best minds, right? I mean, what's the point of learning how to brainwash Mr. Average? Because you've got to brainwash the smart ones, because everybody else follows them. I think that's what they were doing. I mean, it's obvious, it's clear that they've taken it society-wide, and they traumatize us all as a matter of course. Pretty much every few months, there's another horrifying event. And
it's right. Sorry to interrupt, but it's right there in this document, in the filing, that the second amended complaint. It's right there what he's saying. Dulles is saying on an individual and collective basis. So he's not just, people don't see the broader aspects of this program. I think they might overlook it as they're just focusing on one guy. He's talking about the entire socio-psychosphere.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry, please continue.
I can't remember what I was
saying. We were talking about the talented people,
right,
and why your mom was selected, and these upper class, they were trying to take them into Stepford Wives, which is, it kind of like ties into like this kind of Marilyn Monroe kind of esque training that that people are subjected to. Candy Jones, to kind of make the ideal, what a man's ideal woman is, this kind of submissive, whatever. I don't know. It seems odd.
Yeah.
What's also odd? One of the things that's interesting is that the Dulles brothers are from Watertown. I don't know if you knew that, but they're pretty close to Montreal. They're within like an hour, 2 hour drive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's where they grew up. That's where their family kind of I don't know if they had a real estate, but they had kind of like a place on the lake. And so that's,
I mean, I think that the focus on the so-called elites and learning to manage them. I've come to I went to boarding school, a girls' boarding school that was filled with the daughters of very powerful or wealthy men, and the boys' school was about 20 or 30 miles away. And in that boys' school, there was a sexual predator. And a lot of the people that I knew growing up were sexually assaulted by him, and then they just moved this character around to all the other schools as if there was no point in trying to ruin him. It's almost as if they would deliberately traumatize the elites in order to find apex predators, or find useful idiots, or destroy anybody that looked to be that might disrupt their plans. It's not safe up in the upper reaches of society.
You would think that they'd have everything there, but some of those boarding schools are some of the most ruthless, abusive places imaginable. I did a show, maybe this is another one on your list you can listen to, but it's about Churchill and the boarding schools in the 19th century, because they were building an empire. Yeah. So these elites had to be trained. Churchill, heavily abused people. Like, I did a book on Aleister Crowley. He almost died in a boarding school. And I think that shaped his views. He was an elite. He had no empathy. He could just destroy people, brand women with like a cow brand. And Churchill was responsible for, like, he's a very sinister person. He comes across as this hero, but every time he's involved in something, millions of people died. Yeah. Like, he was kind of like one of the people, like, kind of gunning for war, and a lot of starvations. Like, the British Empire would starve out, like, Indians that revolted, and millions of people died, and they just kind of keep going. It's crazy.
Yeah. So that's what we were trained to, was cruelty and losing empathy, losing the ability, and the conversation among our class was sharp and biting and hypercritical, and it was almost as if you were in a army regiment, and you were being trained constantly to be tougher and stronger and more brutal. Now that's definitely what they were doing, for sure.
And that was it. The CIA and those elites, kind of the Eastern elites, I think, that bled over to McGill, they were always sending out these personality exams and trying to sift. They had these STEM classes and trying to find the elites. And the same thing happened at the British aristocracy. Like, and Churchill's a perfect example. It's like they're trying to find the best administrators for their wealth or other things that'll do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're looking for another member of their Luciferian brotherhood. I mean, I don't have any trouble with thinking that.
If you look at Trudeau and Carney, they're creatures of some other, but Trudeau
they're cult figures, both of them, I think. I mean, there are persistent rumors about the Ottawa set and what those kids were subjected to, like Trudeau, and also the Friends kid who died of fentanyl in his pond in Hollywood. What's his name? I didn't watch Friends because I was in Europe.
Oh, right. Yeah, Matthew. Yeah, I know exactly. With the smiley face. And all this stuff, like very creepy kind of
totally
symbology.
Cult. Totally cult. I think that's what they're looking for in those schools. That's what they were looking to perhaps create in MKUltra. They were looking for the kind of person who could do that stuff.
That's probably what they were doing with Kaczynski. He rebelled. Yeah, he rebelled. He was tortured for 3 years. People think that he underwent some kind of like, oh, people were mean and abusive. He went through stuff like the sleep room. They had a helmet on his head. They put things in electrodes in his brain, like from Clockwork Orange, and they abused him. And this guy, Murray was his name. He was like another Cameron. He was a total jerk. Yeah. And they crossed ethical lines. The lines were just erased. There weren't any ethical lines. Yeah. And they did this guy with like a 185 IQ. Like Kaczynski's like out of this world smart. Like he's in the top 100,000th percentile. Like he's very strange, like strange smart.
They don't want smart people out there that are independent thinkers. They don't want them. So they will break them. And I think that a lot of corporate malfeasance is always looking to break smaller businesses because they don't want anybody to rise too far too fast. There's a cap on all activity.
Yes, totally agree. And so you have to see MKUltra is that as almost a component of control, but also like talent spotting, and also keeping societies in its place, I guess, is a way to look at it.
Yeah.
One of the crazy things about this that Cameron is that he was doing creepy experiments in the 30s.
Oh, was he?
It was in this. It's in the complaint that he was doing. I mean, let me see if I can pull this up. But like, I was flabbergasted. A lot of these people, they talk about these kind of experiments as starting in 53 after Dulis's brain type thing, but it's not the case. This is
No, I mean he was. I mean they didn't really. They thought it was necessary to do that, to experiment on people in order to solve the problem. So yeah.
This document's really important to this one that came out on July 31st. This is, I'll read it just so for people in the audio can see it. This is they called what Cameron was doing the Montreal experiment. So they just use a broad term, which I think is very useful. But this is 85, chapter 85, or section 85 in the legal document. Further, prior to the Montreal experiments in the 1930s, Cameron had already been conducting unethical, unscientific, and inhumane brainwashing experiments at the Brandon Mental Hospital in Manitoba. For example, Cameron had been treating schizophrenics with red light produced by filtering light from 15 200-watt lamps through an inch of running water and a layer of sodium salt of DBN, diethylizobis naphthalene sulfuric acid, I don't even know what that is, impregnated into cellophane. The color red was chosen because it is the color of blood. In the experiment, schizophrenic patients were forced to lie naked in red light for 8 hours a day for periods as long as 8 months.
Oh my God.
Another experiment involved overheating patients in an electric cage until their body temperatures reached 102 degrees Fahrenheit. The whole, as appears more fully from a copy of an extract from the book The CIA Doctors, published in 2006, produced here in his exhibit R68.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I have had a cousin who was a biophysicist, and he got his doctorate at the University of Chicago. He told me they all experimented on each other all the time. It was part of the academic world. He was in more the 60s and 50s. He studied or worked at Berkeley. So they were always injecting each other with all kinds of things to see whether there was a kind of free-floating, semi-brutalist ethic going around. I'm not forgiving Cameron, because I think he was, even if he was at the beginning of his career, genuinely interested in healing people, at some point he became ferociously ambitious, and I suspect it was when Dulles picked him up. I mean, he'd written a book about the Germans and how they were to be stopped from doing such a terrible thing again, and that's when Dulles grabbed him and they went to Germany. But I think at that point both men kind of went not just bad, but very, very bad. I don't know whether psychologically they'd seen so much devastation. They were in the camps. They saw the pictures. They saw the experiments. They probably saw the films of what they were doing to children and men and women, and possibly they even got involved with the sort of the vril and the fool society and the worst of the Prussian monsters who, dreamed up Nazism and found Hitler and set him loose. Something happened there.
I agree. He was very much involved. People who don't know, Dulles was very much involved in what we call Operation Valkyrie, which is the attempt to kill Hitler. He was in Switzerland all during that time. And after the war, he became friends with a lot of the Nazis. He was a member of the Knights of Malta. I've done shows on that. And also Galen, who was the intel guy kind of overlooking Soviet Union in the invasion of Operation I forgot what the name of his, but when they invaded Russia in 41, he oversaw that. He was basically absorbed. He became friends with Dulles. He was in the U.S. with Dulles, and even Dulles' son, who's questionable source, said, "My dad is a German spy." Like, it's a very crazy statement for his son to say. His son was brain injured in Korea. He had a really severe injury, but it is an interesting statement. But it seems like Dulles was very sympathetic, because certain people got out and didn't go to Nuremberg. They didn't go, and some people did. So it's an open question as to why.
Yeah.
So these guys are rough. I mean, look, you and Cameron is rough. Maybe you can talk about the lawsuits. You had direct involvement. Your mom was shattered. I mean, did she ever find respite from her?
Well, I mean, there's two things in that question. First of all, my mother rebuilt herself. I've written about this, but what she did, and it's kind of impressive. We moved to the country, and she started skiing in blizzards. Cross-country skiing in blizzards, and she set herself this huge physical task of rebuilding her body. And then she'd been an amateur classical pianist, and she started taking classes, and she would play for 3, 4, 5 hours a day in practice. And she, took exams and got degrees at the Montreal School or the McGill School of Music. So that's how she rebuilt her body and her brain. A lot of the women, mostly I know about the women that were Cameron's patients, sat in a dark room for the rest of their lives, or watched television, or had their brains were, they had to be taken care of. There's several plaintiffs in one of the suits that I'm involved in that they were just broken irretrievably. But my mother rebuilt herself. I mean, she didn't sort of fulfill her earlier promise, but she was hugely functional most of the time, except that she had an alter, which is what they were trying to create. They're trying to create the Manchurian Candidate, the person who had a split and would not remember what had happened prior. So if my mother was placed under stress, like for instance, my father had an accident on one of his boats, or inheritance that she had been counting on went wrong, she would all of a sudden become completely paranoid, and everybody was against her. And she wouldn't go and see anybody. She would not take any drugs. She just became a sort of freewheeling mad woman who would formally go around and break up with all her friends and resign from all her committees. So she was vice president of the University Women's Club in Vancouver, and she, resigned from that because they were all spying on her. And then she was senior ladies champion at the tennis club, and she resigned from that, and in public sort of accused people of following her and spying on her and so on. And then when she came back to Earth, she remembered nothing of that, nothing of it at all. She was just back to normal. She was off to the tennis club, off to lunch and collecting and reading.
So would you say in these episodes she was amnesic, like she couldn't remember them?
No, she couldn't remember them.
So they did do it. That's not Cameron, that's Esther Brooks too, who's like they must have read Esther Brooks or something. That's wow, that's really profound. Like, this is like you're doing, like, that's what they do. They create these altars. They are actually able to do that. It's interesting you said the word Manchurian Candidate, because I've been doing a lot of work on the Manchurian Candidate as a fictional, maybe much like your book, The Monkey Tree, The Monkey Puzzle Tree, is like a fictional thing, but it encapsulates a lot of these themes and concepts.
Well, you can't. For me, it was extremely eerie. I'm the eldest child and the only daughter, so I could see the signs of it coming quite a distance. And when the last time I came out here, I was in London or New York, and I said, Dad, could we talk about this? Because he was ignoring it, because he only took action when it got really bad. And he said, look, your mother is my problem, but when I die, she's yours. And so when he did die, I moved home. And just in a subterfuge, I was sort of surreptitiously watching her, and most of the time she was fine. Even the stress of my father's death didn't really disrupt her. There were a couple of periods in that 15 years that I was kind of in loco parentis, in a way, where she would split, but it would only be for a few days, and you could just kind of keep saying, well, that's not true, and no, that's not happening, and I'm sure they didn't mean it that way, and she would eventually sort of fade back into it. But I mean, the point is that she did not remember that it happened.
Right. So she had that amnesia. They programmed that into her.
They somehow they found out how to do it, and they did it, and that was in the early 60s. So what can they do now? That's what I'd like to know.
That's a great question. I don't know. This is you're making a very, very important statement here, and the profundity of the statement should not be overlooked. You're talking about them creating altars. It's not in any of these documents. I've read a lot. I've read that commission report. I forgot the name of the commission. I've read the early documents. I've read the father, son, CIA. So what they're doing is he's training these people, but it's not coming out to the public. It's probably not in the RUA documents either. That guy, he may not have known the totality. They're clearly being tortured.
Yeah.
But the purpose of the torture is to create these alter personalities.
So they must have, during the experiments, found the point at which point the individual just splits. And I wouldn't have thought that it would be, my mother, I don't ever think that she was genuinely mentally ill. I think she had sort of a nervous illness, the neuroses that a lot of women, frankly, carry around with them, that was medicalized. So they had I would say 90% healthy individual, and they went to town on her. They created this altar, and they went, oh my God, look at what we can do. And then the next step to creating school shooters or mass shooters, that 50 years later, of course they can do that. Of course those kids have no idea what they're doing. Or, maybe after they're put in prison, maybe 10 years, they finally find themselves again. We don't even know that.
They had your mother for 17 years. That's incredible.
Yeah, but she wasn't in the hospital for the whole time. She had a early stay, then she was in weekly therapy with Cameron for 9 months. I can't even imagine. And then after her third child was born, she had a much more significant reality break. And that's the main sort of exhibit in our personal suit against the government and the hospital. So we know a great deal about that. And during that period, she was shocked. She was programmed. She was heavily drugged. And
so this is the main kind of class action lawsuit. You're saying there's a different suit, personal family suit, just from the Nickson family, is that correct?
No, there's a direct action, which has about 50 plaintiffs, which is also grinding its way through the courts. There's another decision coming up on September 1st. I don't really know that much about that one. Generally speaking, they tend to settle these because they're an annoyance and they're embarrassing. So, yeah.
That other lawsuit that Weinstein was involved in was grueling. It was decades long. They just drew it out forever. It was just really horrible. Yeah. The Canadian government would seem to cover it up than actually get to the truth or speed things up or create a commission. It's really bad.
Who wants a precedent of governments not allowed to experiment on their citizens, because that's what this would set, right?
Exactly. In your personal lawsuit, do you mention the alters and the personality change in
I
that
do.
lawsuit? Because I didn't see this. Okay.
So I don't think you'd have access to that yet, although it may be probably on file somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know where the exhibits for this lawsuit that I'm showing here, the Tanny versus Royal Victoria Hospital, are those public? The exhibits that are included with this case, do you know?
I don't know. I'll try and find that out, because it would be
that'd be great.
interesting.
I can call the law office because it's just an important repository, in my opinion, of kind of like all that research. But
because we don't know what happened in the other sub-projects, and what happened at Stanford. What happened with Charles Manson, what happened in Laurel Canyon. There were 150 other, and they think it's 150. It might be more. We don't know.
They can lie about anything. I don't believe Helms when he said he burned all the records, because records showed up in 1977. It's included in this lawsuit. So they found records. So all their records didn't get burned. He's lying. I mean, CIA lies like a rug. There's nothing ever honest comes out of those bones.
Yeah. So interestingly, in Quebec, because of the residential school lawsuits, descendants are able to lodge claims past the various
statute of limitations.
Yeah. So that's a blessing in a way, I guess.
What are the residential school lawsuits? I'm not familiar with that.
The Canadian government started, I believe, in about 1880, taking children out of the reserves and putting them into boarding schools and trying to teach them English and math and science and geography. And a lot of those schools were run by Catholics, and pedagogy was brutal in the 19th century and the early 20th century. They beat the crap out of you, and they were miserable to these kids. Half of the children who went to residential schools are grateful for what they learned, and half felt persecuted. And they've received substantial settlements from the Canadian government. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's so hard because there's so many fantasists around this. There are people saying that, the royal family would come and choose Indian women or babies to sacrifice, and so it's hard. It's hard to. There's a substantial industry in both selling these stories and countering them.
Exactly. I deal with that every day. I deal with this, and it's not published. It's not on my podcast, but I deal with it a lot.
Yeah,
people who think they're telling the truth, who, for whatever reason, and there's been kind of charlatans in the alternate media of different stripes. So I think their motivation isn't the kind of cold, dispassionate search for truth and nailing things down, but kind of like almost celebritizing information and commodifying it.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, whoa, what are you guys doing here? And then it's happened to me. Like, you're supposed to be on board with my kind of little angle, and then I'll be on board with you. So it's like a subtle, tacit type of thing.
Right.
And if you go along with this, we can work together and we can both benefit. It literally happens. Like, and then wow. So it happens to me a lot. There's like 5 interviews I've done that I haven't published because I couldn't validate them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the school. Wow. So
you can. My mother taught me that you can rebuild your brain, and you can rebuild from just about anything. And it was impressive that she was able to do that. That the brain has such plasticity that a sort of constant personal forcing of reason and sense and physical discipline and diet and nutritional. A lot of the people that worked with Cameron in the prairie provinces, the head of psychiatry in Saskatchewan when Cameron was at the University of Manitoba, he split from the profession and became somebody who found he could cure schizophrenia with massive doses of B vitamins. And we've used it on our family, Jamie's son and my brother, that you can actually, if you take 1,000 milligrams of niacin 3 times a day, it will literally eliminate schizophrenia over a period of months. So there was a lot of intellectual ferment in that part of the world at that time. And they, at the same time, both these men, Abram Hoffer and Cameron, were working with Linus Pauling on vitamin C. So there was good work being done. And my mother used nutritional supplements to stabilize her mind. There's no question that they helped a lot.
Was it just vitamins, or did she use other kind of superfoods or?
Yeah, I mean, when my grandmother, her mother, went into the hospital at the age of 97, one of her small suitcase burst open and all of these supplements rolled across the floor, and the nurse turned to my mother and said, "So is your mother one of those ladies who's sick all the time?" And my mother said yes. And she said, "They go on forever." So she had a history in her family of women who lived a long time and who would try basically anything as long as it wasn't a drug to make themselves better. And, you know, she lived well in her old age because of that. So that,
Linus Pauling was an advocate of vitamin C on anything. Like, how was it? Yeah. Cancer, everything. And there's other people in social media, they say, if you get sick, the first thing you do is try to massively dose yourself with liposomal vitamin C. That's your starting point, you know.
Yeah.
How much you can take.
For sure. I mean, I completely agree with that, and I follow in her footsteps. I wanted to ask you something that I haven't heard anybody talk about at all, but I'm sure that you follow the whole Luciferian bloodlines question and the sort of amalgamation of the Masonic lodges at a very high level, and how these people practice child sexual ritual abuse and have various rites that they perform that that they seduce people in the corporate world and government world, and your promotions only happen if you can stomach the cruelty of these rituals. Now, I don't know if any of this is true or not, but there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of testimony. There are a lot of self-published books. So I kind of cruise around this and trying to find something that I can actually pin down. But, you know, I mean, I was trained at Time Magazine. All you needed was 3 people or 2 people who say this is true before you start looking at it and digging into it and saying, okay, is this possible? I think it's possible. But here's another question. My mother, both, and my father, their first ancestors in the U.S. Arrived in the River Colony in Connecticut in the 1830s. And they were both... my mother is a direct descendant of Thomas Hooker, who is thought of as the founder of American democracy. He was a prelate from England, and he took 100 people and horses and left the Massachusetts colony because the colony was coalescing into a few members of the elite running everything, and he disagreed with it and wanted to walk away from it and said, you know, we have to have democracy, everybody one man, one vote, and so on and so forth. And my father's family was very much a dominant Puritan family that ran up the spine of New York State. They were on the Underground Railroad. They fought for the Indians. They married into the Indian families. They built churches and schools and hospitals. And that is the sort of history, the 400-year history of my father's family in North America, is just a string of churches and schools, of hospitals all across the country, from, upper New York State or Windsor, Connecticut, all the way to Oregon and up into British Columbia and so on. So what if there's a bloodline of the virtuous, and that Cameron's gang, who apparently all do everybody's genetic history, are hunting those people? What if?
Well, that might be possible, but I do believe that some of these families, they definitely have Luciferian things. All you have to do is look into Skull and Bones or some of the leading secret societies at Yale and Masonry all over the place. I mean, Crowley is a good example. That's how I got my start. Really, 15 years ago, I wrote a book on Crowley called Prophet of Evil. He thought of himself as, he wanted to change the whole world into his religion, Thelema. And I think his ideas, he called himself a priest to the princes. So he was kind of like an occult figure, but he did not believe, he didn't have an egalitarian bone in his body. He believed the slave shall serve, and his religion was for people to have their religion to rule over other people. Came to the U.S., was in New York City during World War I, mixed with the elite glitterati, whatever you want to call it, all the way up until his end, and treated people terribly, but definitely in blood rituals, definitely secret oaths, definitely into the worst kind of sexual crimes imaginable. Yeah, in one of his magical books, he literally raped his own infants. So the worst type of stuff imaginable. And so that's real. That's verifiable. That's his writing. It's not me. So that's an example. But then the thing is that his ideas permeate almost all of occultism to the present. And it's still that way in Hollywood. They believe in sex magic. They believe in kind of this kind of goat behavior. And there are initiations and initiatory ideas. I think Trump is involved in this stuff too. He denies it. Yeah, 100%. He knows really complex hidden concepts like the Tesseract. He knows that.
Really?
And,
I mean, in construction, masonry is important in construction, so of course he would be inducted into it.
He makes Masonic gestures. His kids do. He does. You don't see him in a Christian church very often, if ever. Much like Bush Jr. and Sr.
I'll tell you, my pioneer family is one of the 9 founders of Skull and Bones.
Well, there you go. I mean, the Russell Trust and everything that started Yale was involved in opium. I mean, Skull and Bones is all over the place. They're involved in a lot of stuff that may not be good. The public school system, corporate America, it's just all kinds of stuff. So want to talk, they're into ritual magic. They're into ceremonial magic.
Okay, so that was the point that I was trying to.
I don't know who's in the background. Sorry to interrupt, Elizabeth, but somebody keeps beeping or hammering your microwave or something's going on.
Oh, babe, stop that.
Because that people complain. They'll be like, "Oh, the sound is terrible." That's my number one complaint. They love my guests, but they always get angry if the sound is bad.
We didn't know.
It's okay. Some mics pick it up, some don't.
So what if there is a bloodline of the just? And, some of these families, my Phelps family split off from the New York, Massachusetts branch 350 years ago. So what if there is this? I'm just saying that a lot of what we look at is so dark and so ugly that we would not be in the state we were there not a bloodline of the just. Were there not sort of hundreds of years of Christians doing good in small towns and small cities and big towns all across North America and Europe? And they just have to wake up and be aware of who they are and what power they have over these awful idiots.
I agree. I think they had to take Christianity out of the schools. I think they had to take it out of the public discourse. I think the Council of Churches, which is a Rockefeller thing,
Yeah.
had to subvert things. They had to make them 501c3, so they're dependent on the government. So these aren't kind of like the rebels of like the early Christian church who are
No.
screaming, like Christ is screaming bloody murder at,
Yeah.
hell at everybody.
Yeah.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees.
Yeah. I mean, the church itself is completely corrupt.
I think
However,
so.
within it, Christianity is growing. I mean, I'm a typical Time magazine journalist. I haven't been to a church, but Christianity is extremely important to me. One that something I could not live without, had I having gone through understanding what happened to my mother and the destruction of her intellect and personality that she had to spend a decade fighting back from. I couldn't have handled life had I not known that. So I'm thinking they've got to be out there.
The next generation after us is very different. They have seen a lot of nightmare stuff. They are very faith centered, much more than my generation.
Yeah.
It's very strange. And they don't drink as much.
Yeah.
They're very different. Like, drinking has gone to their credit. They're very aware, and they see horrible stuff on their media every day that no kid should ever see. Like, you used to be able to turn off the TV, but now they're doomed. It's doom scrolling. They're literally seeing kids get dismembered in Gaza and the war, and we're right at the brink of nuclear war, and it's been that way for 3 years. Like, they see some of that stuff, so they know. They sense the evil. They're aware of that kind of evil. I think that's very important, is recognizing the evil, so that you can kind of see that, okay, this is bad, then there's a good. So there's good choices. But it's interesting what your mom went through. You mentioned Manchurian Candidate. At the very end, this kind of controller, handler, his mother, who's based on Roy Cohn, right? According to Richard Condon. Yeah, based on Roy Cohn, who's big influence on Trump, right? So Cohn was like the original Epstein blackmailer behind McCarthy. Yeah. She says to her son, who she's going to use in this kind of assassination, she said, I apologize, they are going to rape your soul. And I think it's very, like, this kind of thing that they did to these people without their consent, without their awareness, is a kind of rape of the soul that takes place in cults. And it's interesting, just to finalize, I wrote a book, Children of the Beast, about Hubbard, this is happening around Hubbard too, who's like got this Alice in Wonderland programming and all this stuff like that. But his son rebelled against his dad. He was called Nibs. He had all these nicknames and stuff like that. But he eventually saw his dad as an evil figure, who loved Crowley, by the way. And his son said, what my dad's work, it was black magic over time, but it ended up to be the rape of the soul. He uses that same phrase. And it's really incredible, because people who come out of Scientology, they're like people who came out of you and Cameron. They've been tampered with.
Right. Well, at least we know. At least we know it's happening. And every month there's something new about this coming out, and it's going to happen. I know that it's going to happen, that everybody becomes aware of it and it stops. I have to think that.
There's so many strange things about these guys who are going around today, Ruth and Crooks and Mangione. Like, Mangione is very strange. And there's weird overlaps with these fictional books, like Catcher in the Rye. I mean,
so I think those are used as code books, right? Those are code books. Catcher in the Rye is a code book, and within that is buried. So they possibly could have been programmed with phrases from that book, that you could solve the problem using the violence in that book. So it would just be a matter of repetitions inside their earphones, in some kind of drugged state. So I think they've probably got it down to a really quick science. You can fix somebody into a school shooter
or somebody tried to kill a major public figure like Chapman or Hinckley. One of the interesting things, Catcher, it's really sophisticated, and they do something that, it's hard for me to accredit personally right to Salinger, and that is they invert this word. So the Catcher is also a good, I'm saving these kids, which is also weird because there's pedophilia in that book. He's got a weird obsession with his sister Phoebe, who's 10, who talks like an adult. That's like the classic pedophile motif, is that these kids are actually old enough to do this, which is complete BS. But also they invert the word Catcher. He has a trigger word. Holden Caulfield has this trigger word. It's called FU, right? So he sees FU on a statue and he wants to catch that person and bash his brains out with blood all over the steps. It's ultra violent. It's too violent for a supposed thing. Like, so they take this turn, and now you see this kind of fusing of imagery in this mind control stuff and concepts. So it's like catching, but he's also going to catch this person and kill them, right? So it's like weird. Like, so somebody could say catch to him and the response would be different. It would be one that's super violent. And there's also masonry in there. You want to talk about black magic. He goes downstairs and goes into like the old Egyptian catacombs, at the Museum of Natural History. You should read Catcher in the Rye as an adult. It's it's really,
I found it depressing.
It's depressing. There's nothing about Holden Caulfield he's not an anti-hero. I don't think there's anything heroic about him. There's nothing redeeming about him. He's he's really in bad shape, and he has dissociative states. He has almost like alters. Like, that's what they're presenting to these kids. 65 million books of that sold. That's what should tell you everything is that Bill Gates and George Bush, that's one of their favorite books.
Yeah. So they probably went through some kind of programming too. Have you talked to Nathan Reynolds yet?
No, I probably should. That's another one. I think Trump. No, I think Bush Sr. knows everything about this MK stuff. As the head of the CIA and buddies with Helms, he's the heir to Dulles, to Helms, to Bush. Yeah, they're direct heir. They're direct legacy heirs of all of this knowledge. There's absolutely no question about it.
Well, having grown up in that world, I have absolutely no problem with understanding, or at least being familiar with the thinking that it was their responsibility, their duty to do this in order to make the world a better place, to order things in a better way. Their sense of superiority was unshakable. It was unshakable. They believed that they were the smartest people and the most virtuous people, and even the sexual abuse that you read about with Bush Sr. and I can see them seeing that as their reward for the hard decisions that they had to make. That state of mind is very familiar to me, and it's everywhere. Once you get into those circles where you have so much control over thousands of people, and then tens of thousands of people, and then hundreds, you become a god, and gods have certain prerogatives. And maybe those prerogatives are 10-year-old boys every week. That's got to be what's going on in their brains. Has to be.
I think that there's a cycle of abuse. So they were abused and they're going to abuse back. Yeah. So I think that's like the culture, and even at the elite, at the higher levels. Yeah. And so it just becomes not just sexual, physical abuse, psychic abuse, and elite abuse, and then they're trained that way. Like, I'm going to make the most ruthless, power-hungry guy like George Bush Jr. Like, they got meaner as they got older. They went from Prescott to G.H.W. Bush to George, like, just crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's just like incredible stuff. So I think that it's there, and also they admitted a lot of these CIA guys, and Angleton admitted a lot of stuff. He never said what he did, but he said we were on the path. When you say power, he just made an admission, like, we were on the path to total power, and all my friends are in hell, and I will be there soon. Like, I don't remember it verbatim, but like, he mentions the psychology of power. These guys really are power hungry. And the Godhead thing is real. And that kind of ties back to the occult view of things. Like a Christian is, there is something outside of myself of a higher power. Like you admit that. But Crowley's dictum is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
There is no God but man.
Yeah.
So I am the, and you see, he called himself, like before Hitler was I am. It's a play on Christian New Testament statement by Christ. But I think Hitler was on like that same path of total power, of apotheosis, human advancement beyond as much as possible, as much power as possible. Yeah.
So the end times have them hunting Christians across the land and killing them in very ingenious ways that last a very long time. How close are we to that, do you reckon?
Pretty close. I think that Israel will be a widening gyre of like anti-Christian hatred, and you already see it now. They actually made statements like recently, like too bad for the Christians in Gaza. So I guess they're Hamas too. Nobody in Gaza likes Hamas because it was imposed upon them by the Israeli government itself. People can't quite put that together. It's a big intel op, but I think that the Israel state, Greater Israel, and I mean international Jewry is real. Like the roads to Auschwitz, the genocide in Gaza, the road comes out of the United States. There's no question about it. Actually, the whole reason Israel exists is because of the United States. For whatever reason, there's some kind of weird triple helix of the industrial, military, and complex Jewry, international Jewry, and all these things coming together, and they hate Christians. So I think that's they actually would Jews would actually rather live with Muslims than Christians. They think they get it better, and they think that the New Testament is inherently anti-Jewish. So that means that we're all inherently anti-Semites just by going to church, which is kind of a farcical joke. They have this idea that we idolize Christ, like you're not supposed to idolize him, but they also haven't read the New Testament because all the people who founded Christianity are Jews. Like that's the ultimate joke. It's like Jesus of Nazareth is Jewish. They include his bloodline, I think, in Matthew, in the Gospel of Matthew and John. Like you can see his bloodline through Abraham. Like so anyway, I think that there's an excuse there. And if you listen to like the speeches of Netanyahu, he doesn't forget all of these bad things. He always mentions the Holocaust. He literally mentioned the Dreyfus affair. So all these things, bad things that happened to Jews, this anti-Semitism, you can see as a leader of international or Jewry, he's not forgetting. This isn't a turn the other cheek kind of mentality. So I think that we're getting closer. So they'll just find, like you said, ingenious ways. The COVID shot, allowing people into the country, rapists and child rapists, open season into the country. It's already happening, so it's not really that funny.
Have you seen the St. George's Cross being flown all over Britain?
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive. And people are, once you wake up the British and they start fighting, it can get pretty interesting. I'm excited by it.
Well, I think people need to fight back. Like they've basically taken culture. Like there's a huge culture war that's going on. It's really a civilizational war. Yeah. It's beyond racial. It's just your civilization is at stake. Yeah. And whether you're going to survive or not. Because I mean, here in California, they've stolen hundreds of billions of dollars. Like it's just been siphoned off and disappeared. Like they've had the whole rail system's gone. Like that's our civilization. You're supposed to be building it. Like there's a dumb bridge in Manteca. And nobody does anything because it's a cartelized. So everybody's dipping their beak like a mob. So it's just a total joke here, and the roads aren't fixed. So it's really it's a matter of survival. We're past racial stuff. It's like, are you going to survive and your kids are going to survive? You had 400 years of your family there. Like it may not last that much longer, guys, especially if they're importing infinity people from India into Canada. Like the whole culture and country is changing. Here you've got like weaponized truckers, like literally annihilating people left and right who shouldn't be. And it's part of the corruption of the civilization and corruption. Are you going to tolerate this stuff? And I think the answer is yeah. We are at the hour mark, Elizabeth. Where can people find your work? Where can people find your books? And where can people reach out to you and find out more about the lawsuits and your work?
All right, so I write Welcome to Absurdistan on Substack. I publish every Saturday, and I'm quite popular. And the books are at the end of every piece, but Amazon, Nickson, Nickson. It's a fairly unusual name. Easy to find.
Cool. Substack, the books. Check out your Substack. Go sign up for the Substack. We had 200 live listeners, so thanks a lot for listening live, people. Really appreciate it. Share the show. Share this lawsuit. It's really an important document, I think, because it's up to date. This is 2025, and it aggregates all of these lawsuits and all this information, and hopefully I can get my hands on the exhibits because they are incredible. It's like 200 exhibits, too. But again, the author is Elizabeth Nickson, Nickson, and we talked about this new class action against MKUltra, which we'll watch, hopefully go through the system. They'll probably go through the system at a glacial pace, but at least it's something people can keep their eye on. So, and there
have to be tens of thousands of victims of MKUltra in the States. Have to be, and they all have a case.
Yes, and if you're an authentic victim, write something. Put something in writing and send it to me. Don't tell me the story that you don't have verified facts to, or some garbledy, conspiracy mishmash thing. But if you can provide dates and times and specifics, that's it. That's what I distinguish. That's what I have to do to distinguish guests. Elizabeth, is like, are there verified facts or you just telling me?
Yeah.
So don't tell me a story. Give me verified facts. Like this case, like this is all factual stuff. It's great to talk with you. I appreciate you taking the time to share your personal story, and it's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.